shitcoins, and then if I do it private, I'm gonna be happier because tax invasion or something. Well, good luck with that. But if we address that to be the main aim, where we're actually heading to, but what we also put in practice every minute of our life in our relations and how we socially connect, then we can look into strategies how we get there and why we're doing the things we're doing. And to me, then this, like what we're calling for is one, and why I'm in crypto, why I'm in tech is reach to economical sovereignty. Because aiming to freedom needs autonomy, and to have autonomy, we need to talk about economical sovereignty, which, by the way, I think is one of the original ideas of crypto. Not replicate the TradFi system, but on-chain, but actually build economical sovereignty. Another one is distributed tech, software and hardware. And the last one way of those is knowledge, how to use those and how to grow those. And that's within each of the involved communities. Not that you have some people who go into the stuff early and they will for the rest of their life be 10 steps ahead of the rest of the world, but actually creating truly decentralized platforms, how to educate each other to lift the knowledge of economical sovereignty and the knowledge of technical skills and understanding. And only for that, as a tactic, we need strong and foundational privacy and anonymity. And that should be by default. And I think if we understand the way what's actually fundamental, what's the aim, and what should be by default our foundation, while we're doing that, then we don't even have to talk about it. And I think this had been missing. So I come back again to my long entry now, that I'm happy to see that on Ethereum, but the fact that since 2016 up until maybe last year, we really didn't, Ethereum was all about transparency and transparency. I think that shows a wrong analysis of what's actually happening. We have like this imaginary of like solar punk while the rest of the world is burning. So I think it's not to scare people like cypherpunk kind of vision where there's this like one warrior who is like private and save himself from the others, from like the tyranny of the world. Neither it's this like blind utopistic imaginary that we the good doers here. But I think we can take bit of both and bit of neither. I mean, we call it lunar punk, that's pretty clear. For others, that's different. But I think having better understanding what we're doing and why we're doing that and how we're doing that and have that clear will give us a bit of better way how to approach particular questions, which I would be happy to answer as well, but I don't want to speak forever, so I'll pass the word.
I think that's a good point. I think to reframe the question, like privacy is really hard. So to use a crypto or non-Web3 example, look at Signal or look at Tor. Like Signal, really well-designed private messaging app. It's probably like 80 to 85% of the way there. But of course, you have to give up your phone number, right? And obviously, there's a lot of metadata associated with that. So that's a Signal example. Tor, right? Again, Tor is probably 80 to 85% of the way there. But it's open source knowledge that governments are running Tor nodes, and then they have the ability to run predictive analytics and kind of backwards predict transactions or traffic rather on the Tor network. So I think, and this Logos is an interesting project that's kind of evolving this, but at least up till now, I think recognizing that it's about layering privacy. Privacy is kind of ephemeral, and it's tough. And I think once you recognize, once you recognize that in the design of a system, then you can actually get after solving for it, right? But if you have the resources of a state against you, or a criminal group, or pick your malicious adversary, even like a little trace of metadata is enough to break something, break a chain. And then to bring it back to crypto, we see that with Chainalysis and TRM and all those folks. They have really good predictive analytics capabilities, right? So, and of course, some of that's good, right? But obviously, for the purposes of the panel, we're trying to build self-sovereign systems so that understanding these design constraints from the beginning is really important.
I would maybe add one thing. I think what is missing is also a bridge between this industry and between people who are seeking or perhaps not seeking, but need those solutions every day. That means that in the industry we keep developing niche solutions, and we have to preach to each other why to use them, right? We've got Ethereum for how long time, and now we are like, but we need privacy. It exists, and there is these solutions, and we have to explain why use it. And then there is so many communities, regions in Europe and in the north, and even more so in the south and east, which desperately need these solutions every day, but then the innovations from the industry never get to them in that way. Like many of them are at the point of Tether is kind of the alternative to hyperinflationary currency or something like that. So to bridge this niche tech and the bubble which is existing within the industry and the large communities, societies, and movements which are existing even outside of the door, you don't have to travel to some farther countries. You could and you should with those solutions as well. But I think that's what needs to be addressed, in my opinion.
Certainly agree with that. And something you said, Spencer, about the examples you chose, which were 88% of the way there. Is it reasonable to try and iteratively improve on security? Is it possible to get to 100 if you have an 88% solution, or do you need to start from scratch with 100% solution?
Start from scratch, yeah.
Draco, can you improve privacy of situation and get at least close enough to be functionally good, or?
Well, it depends on what use case you're going for, right?
It's like if you start from a compromised solution, you can never get to 100. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
Well, it's a difficult one. Partly, I would say yes, on a technical level, for sure. Then there is a truth, and then there's reality. I go first time to Kurdistan, and I try to explain my mom, here I pre-installed Tailstick for you. You only plug it to your computer, you press F12, you do all these things, blah, 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 blah. 2 hours later, then you click this button that makes your PGP, blah, 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 an hour later, and then me in Kurdistan see an email from you. Well, you can imagine we never exchange a single email. A Signal comes into play. I'm second time in Kurdistan, and all of a sudden we are chatting with my mom. So, there is is there perfect privacy between us? No. We all know that it's not, but it improved possibilities of existing problem. So I think, of course, on technical level, there are no gray zones. And me as being a developer for name, I cannot be advocate here for half privacy, professionally speaking. Well, humanly speaking, it's also a cultural thing. And again, it comes with education and understanding. So I think if you make somebody understand why Signal over Messenger, that step in mind, even though it's almost the same GUI, can also open understanding why next time we can actually talk about the full stack.
So we can't get to 100 from something that's compromised, and we can't, and there's, the next question will lead to the reason why I'm asking this. And so Spencer, you spent quite a bit of time trying to find bugs and privacy issues and security issues inside people's code and various other things. You're a full stack development firm. The difficulty of identifying all of the problems with a given schematic or implementation of a protocol is really hard. You're never going to get all of them. In fact, that's one of the hallmarks of it's not an audit, it's a security review, because we make no guarantees that there are no problems. So if we can't iteratively improve to 100, how do we build confidence that what we're building actually works for what we're trying to do? How do we grow that to a point where it actually makes a difference in the things we're building maximally?
Yeah. So my comment about the the 80 versus 100%, it's more so about from the architecture phase of whatever application you're trying to build, just understanding the design constraints. And I think Signal could have been. I don't think they took the phone number aspect into account the way they should have. But to answer your question about the process, you want to bring as many people in that have relevant insights as early on. So with smart contract development, we're trying to bring security engineers as far left as possible, in the architecture phase, and it's rigorously testing. So yeah, you obviously can iterate from the beginning. Yeah.
How do you, like, you've spent a lot of time looking and trying to implement privacy solutions. How do you build to be maximally confident in what you're doing does what it's supposed to do? And then how do you monitor to try and find like weaknesses in that and fix them?
How do you monitor what?
Build to try and maximally be confident in what you're doing does what it's supposed to do. And then how do you monitor to just make sure that it's doing that after you've pushed it out?
Well, I'm not a dev myself, so I need to put that out there first of all. My coding skills are not on a dev level, so I wanna put that disclosure here. But to that, like, I wanna say that it's always a race, right? There is, especially now with the AI tech and everything happening out there, and we only see bits. Like, imagine what the NSA has, imagine what the state agencies have in their hands, what China probably operates with. When everyone from your computer, from your phone can run ChatGPT, imagine what Chinese government is running. Like, have no idea. Meaning this is a constant race. So you can never sit down and be kind of like, now we made it. We got version 1.000 through like hundreds of subversion building to that point, and that's it. Because the moment you made it, there is already at that very point somebody, and at this time it's gonna be robots and computers working on trying to find vectors how to attack your stack, how to attack your platform. So the moment you put it out, you already better be building a next step to that and thinking already what the next step to that. When it comes to vulnerabilities, one of the problems which is also existing is that, it's like when you do a little lie, and then you kind of like feel ashamed of that, and then you're building a whole story on that, and then one moment it blasts, and then somebody tells you like, why the hell didn't you tell me in the first place? Like from, kissing somebody you shouldn't have, like it got into like big problems 2 years later. And I think with tech, I see that as well. I think there is sometimes like people do have little vulnerability or have little problem, but then they feel like, oh, that would like kill my reputation or something. So they try to cover it, kind of like the FTX style thing, and then all of a sudden like it blows up and it becomes like really big. So I think like honesty, like there should be we're working towards maximal anonymity and maximal privacy, which means the organizations building that should be maximally transparent about what's also not working just yet. And tell users this part, this feature, or this implementation is not finished, is maybe in a beta version, this is in testing, it's up to you, consider it might be hazardous and stuff like that. So I think giving warnings and being honest about it is also very important, rather than to like have the competition between us. And I think that's what should be different in privacy and anonymity industry, is this collaboration. Of course, competition might help us to be kind of like pushing each other a little bit farther, but to a certain degree, I think there to a certain degree needs to be, and we see that. We see you use cryptographic primitives from that, you use code from that, and you're putting, it's the Unix composability, it's nothing new about it. And I would like to see that more, together with the honesty and calling other projects like, hey, let's collaborate on that. This thing is not working out. What about like we connect on that level? And I think by that we create really, really strong and bulletproof culture, which then will produce that tech, rather than pretend like we are bulletproof by itself, because there's some pride in that.
Yeah, something we've seen, really good points, and I just have one minor addition there, which is at Spearbit we've seen some projects come to us that have novel cryptographic primitives that were implemented on the blockchain, and they're taking research papers that haven't been put in production before and trying to implement them in prod with little to no testing. So the point would just be, theory is different than implementation, and you have to rigorously test. Yeah.
Would you call that valuable? That process of, I would call it experimentation. Maybe you might call it hubris or naivety of someone taking something that isn't necessarily sufficiently secure in your eyes, putting an implementation, and then people putting real value in it. Is that valuable to the community, or is it overall a detriment?
Very valuable, but you had a good point, right? It's about setting a cap on the downside. So if we're just strictly talking about a crypto protocol, make sure that users can only put, X amount of funds, right? Whitelist it for a beta release. Just basic, crawl, walk, run. Don't go 0 to 100. Go like 0 to 5, and then to 10, and then maybe to 100. It's just fundamentals. DeFi Security Summit was pretty good, and there was the spicy panel that went viral. Mitch Lamador was right. He kind of got on some of the folks on the panel about the need for discipline, right? He's absolutely correct. It's just discipline and process to be able to churn through things, right? And going back to my earlier point, like the discipline to, in the architecture phase, of whatever you're designing, being really rigorous and trying to understand edge cases, understand how an attacker is going to try to exploit whatever you're building, and then just doing that like every single time you iterate and design something to update your product for users. And people can do that once, but it's the expert teams that can just do that like clockwork, just like time and time again, shipping secure code. And it really takes a culture of like rigor to be able to do that. It's impressive when you see it, but not a lot of teams in our space have that, right? Because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to have a security engineer in the room when you're whiteboarding and say, no, actually you can't do that. Sorry, that design choice doesn't work. Because you have other pressures. You want to deliver value to users, right? You want to get stuff out there. So it's like the great artists, measure twice, cut once type of deal. It's tough. But if you're trying to design secure systems, you got to do it.
I would like to, we've made it clear it's really hard to design private and secure systems, and it's really hard to acknowledge if you've built something that is not secure or has a privacy problem, to acknowledge it and be honest and open about it. Is it even possible to design something that's 100% private?
Hasn't been. I mean, a one-time pad. There you go. That's like literally the only thing that is like truly private, and it's one time. So there's a spectrum. It's an X and Y axis of, X is how private it is, and Y is how long is it, private. With a one-time pad, in the, far right or top right quadrant of that graph. But yeah, there's a trade-off. Like you got to pick one, either privacy or length of time, and you get one.
Differing opinion?
Well, if I tell you a secret, it's no longer a secret. That brings me to the point that a lot of things which there is different levels of things. So a lot of things which will be private between me and you, the privacy is broken by its nature because it's already me and you, right? There's already two people. I mean, I've chose to disclose that, so that's not a problem. But I'm also trusting you, which can at any point in future time change your opinion, your mood, your relation to me, your incentives, and that can be a liability. So what is 100% private in that sense? That's why me personally, I'm more on the side of anonymity, kind of things, because that's more creating a layer in which we can more as a community exist, and within which from the outside there is that protection, but from within we can be more relaxed, rather than having and I'm not saying privacy equals that, don't get me wrong, but sometimes from the cypherpunk culture it kind of comes to this like a paranoia. There is this a thing that people start to be scared to talk to each other because what if? And I think that's when it becomes to be, you start to be thinking about the privacy, but you're not realizing how much freedom again you're missing because it got completely to you in a way that you basically lost sense of basic human relation. Can we be 100% private? I guess no in that sense, but there are definitely solutions which can bring us very close meaning that there is very high plausible deniality. Sorry for that. No, excuse my French. Finally, I could have said it in Paris. Which I think can bring us very close to exist in quite a solid state of things.
So that's kind of like the point I'm getting to. It's like we can't have 100% privacy. Privacy is hard. Securing privacy is hard. Where is it most beneficial for us to focus the implementation of privacy when building digital communities?
I'm going to get philosophical. I think it's make it good enough so where we can meet up in person. And what do I mean by that? So, like, what is the point of network states? You know, I don't know if you guys read the book, right? Network state typology, but it's, you know, cloud first, but not land never, right? So the goal of privacy is to, you know, keep comms secure enough so you can meet up with your homies eventually and just hang out and then talk about whatever you want, you know, in person. You know, maybe that's over like a 5 to 10 year timeline. I don't know, but you know, if that's again going back in military history and thinking about you know how cryptography really developed. Like, you know, carrier pigeons were used, right? And you know, it was known that like a certain amount of them would get captured or whatever, and you just kind of rolled with it in the design of the system. So, yeah.
I would come back to what I was telling before. I think as the bridge to the people who actually need that without actually actively seeking for the solutions, because maybe it's even outside of the imagination. No, if you like thought certain way, example can be like basic transactions. Yes, we got Monero and we got L2s on Ethereum and what have you. We got Lightning. Whatever, don't argue with me whether it's anonymous or not, but I'm just putting examples. They exist. But then, like, how much real-world implication actually exists for that? Like, example could be, for example, Sweden. I was referring to the Nordic culture this morning in my talk, so I would go there back again. It was always very kind of easy about supporting different, you know, movements could exist within Sweden, particularly the Kurdish movement. So they would do naturally a lot of fundraising for the things happening in Kurdistan. All of a sudden, the Russian invasion to Ukraine happens. There is a pressure. Sweden wants to join NATO, even no one was really asked. And because Turkey is in NATO, Turkey desires the Kurdish movement to be completely persecuted. So like that, a place which is a safe haven for fundraising for the activities connected to Kurdish movement in Kurdistan becomes to be terrorism all of a sudden. And then people who've been fundraising money for schools, for women's social centers and some children things, all their PayPals are frozen, just like that, overnight. What is PayPal, right? For us, everyone's like, PayPal.
You mean like their bank accounts?
Yeah, like PayPal accounts and their bank accounts.
Got it. Oh, PayPal.
PayPal accounts
PayPal.
and bank accounts as well. So PayPal is like, for us, it's like L3 of fiat, right? Like, we all probably sometime use it, but it's also a bit of a joke. Well, for everyday people and those who actually really need these solutions, like, if you would say, hey, why you don't use Monero? You know, like, it's like, what is even that? And what am I gonna buy in that? And how I'm gonna cash it out down in, you know, how my wife is gonna cash it out in Kurdistan. So, you know, long story short, like, it again brings this bridge of like, how communities in need, or we see there is a ban on abortion happening in so many states in US. Well, if you are a doctor and you're gonna face possible, I don't know how many decades in prison for helping somebody who was already going through such a trauma as being raped, getting out of unwanted children, then you might not wanna carry that abortion. So I think these solutions really need to be in place for people who possibly need even more than us sitting on this stage. So I would come back to that. That's, I think, where the need is, and I can bring many examples.
Really quick on that point. So like WhatsApp is an interesting example here, where like in that situation, it's not about, you know, swimming faster than the shark. It's about swimming faster than the other guy. And if you're trying to stop mass surveillance, you know, making the cost higher in some cases can be sufficient. Like in this case, I don't think any of those, or a lot of those folks were, truly targeted by like, exquisite high-end actors or what have you, right? It's more so like, hey, if, unfortunately, it's a bad situation, unfortunately, but like, hey, if you were a Kurd in was it Sweden and Finland? Because of geopolitical stuff outside of your control, one day you went from being, like legal in the eyes of the state to not, right? And in that case, to make it concrete both for Web 2 and for crypto, it's like, okay, how do you, and this goes back to the 80 versus 100% conversation, Corey, bake in features that are good enough, right? Like, hey, if even if they have disappearing messages, right, on WhatsApp or Telegram, it doesn't even have to be Signal, right? And we know Signal's not even perfect, right? But you can bring the quotient better, where hey, it's not, maybe it's not perfect, but it's not like WeChat, where everything's logged and going straight to the CCP, right? So the concrete advice is know what your end user is. If you're building for privacy maxis, then you have to go back to my earlier point of like, hey, let's get hardcore with this. Let's red team it from the beginning. The only acceptable failure is no failure, right? But if you're building for the end user, for the Kurdish folks that are living in Sweden, or pick a consumer segment, right? Have end-to-end encryption. Don't log more metadata than you have to, like basic stuff, And it's a UX decision that product managers and protocol designers can make and be conscious about. So.
I would add that if there is thing which I would really like to see, and I see there's different projects working on that, that's the actual anonymous DAOs. I think that's something which will change a lot, especially like having, the anonymous voting and all that stuff. I think that's quite a needed solution. There is Aragon working on that. There is DarkFi working on that. Lunar DAO is searching who to, invest into to kind of like make them deliver that solution. So I very much hope that we're going to see that soon.
I've got an interesting one here. This is a little bit of prep here. We obviously believe that, you're privacy advocates, I'd say, that privacy by default is a general good idea. But the implementation of privacy is very hard and often has hard trade-offs in terms of usability, especially depending on like what you're talking about, right? And as application developers and people who build software for other people who, generally speaking, tend to not give a shit about privacy. And one of the unfortunate consequences of privacy is that those who don't care about it, when they do need to care about it, it's usually too late for it to make a difference for them. So, as application developers or people who care about privacy advocacy and building things for other people who generally don't care about privacy, where do you draw the line between making decisions about private defaults for them or giving them options to choose to opt in or opt out? How do you navigate that boundary between making something for people and then making decisions based on their privacy for them?
I'll go a little bit around that, and I'm going to get quickly to the point. There was a research carried out in Austria and Germany, which culturally are rather similar countries. Of course, they are different, but they are similar. And the research was carried, if you die in, unexpected death, can we use your organs to be given away to somebody else for like aid somebody after accident or something? In one of the countries was, if you agree, tick the box. I don't know if it was Germany or Austria. Another country was, if you disagree, tick the box. Well, the result was that whatever the box was ticking for, the tick in the box was for, it was always above 80% of people who did not tick the box. Well, I'm dead, what's gonna be happening with this? But you kind of like, well, I guess this is the thing, I don't have to, or there was like, if you disagree, take this someday. So what I'm trying to say by this is that I think by default, with the possibility opting out, is not against each other. What is the problem is that we are transparent by default with a possibility which is rather hard and challenging to opt out into privacy, actually, into anonymity. So I think if we only switch upside down the paradigm, that it is by default, and if you don't like that, take the box and something will be happening, metadata will be stored, and preferably the other user who you're communicating with will be informed about that or something like that, then take the box, do the button or something like that. I think that's the design we should aim to and figure out how not only applications, but a web browser and the internet in system-wide level should be designed. I think that's the architecture which I would like to see.
Two things. One is, to your point, make it easy. The second is having privacy by default. Actually, like, I think a lot of the reason why in the past it wasn't put into the software was because of cost. But it can actually reduce costs. It can actually reduce the liability of a protocol or a program owner. Because it, you know, whether it's government regulation like GDPR or CCPA, or just like legal liability for you know, stuff people do on your platform. If it's private and like it's private by design, just makes customer support a lot easier. And I think with like the spread of widely available cryptographic primitives, it's becoming easier for, and the SDKs that allow you to implement stuff pretty easy. It's the barrier to entry is reducing, which is good. This is not like the 90s where you have to, you know, hard code, you know, RSA or whatever.
Let's see if we can do some. Yeah, I'm going to open up to the audience if they have any questions for us in general about privacy and security and how to think about it appropriately when building for digital communities. But like, do you have any closing thoughts? Like, do you have any words of wisdom? Do you feel like there's something people should know when it comes to thinking about privacy and security when you're building for online communities that work together, especially when there's maybe value associated with it?
Test early and test often. And yeah, this goes back to like, if you're serious about having an online community that has a lot of value, you need to be disciplined in how you think about that value and then how you implement that value. And you know, be disciplined and be thorough in your thinking from day one. Don't to your point, Corey, don't do it after the fact because it's already too late.
If people are not on board with what you are doing, rather than looking down on them, try to understand that there is something wrong in the way you're approaching things, and focus more on education. Focus more on how lifting others up. I really appreciate Dark5 focus in that. They help many of us a lot in kind of like, they go like hard Linux OG way, but then at the same time like putting so much effort into like really lifting people into understanding why that philosophy in practice actually matters and why that makes difference, and how to lift people up so they can teach others. So not only they can use it, but create teachers, create mentors. Of course, while doing, you will be a step ahead again, but make sure that there is like, that the gap's not growing, that you make people who are like able to scale that up. There will be one thing. And I forgot a second actually. I've had one more, but I think that's about it.
All right, awesome. I'll open up to the audience. Do you have any questions or comments or concerns around the idea of
when are network states going to exist in real life? Oh, sorry, audience question.
Let's go with that. Yeah. Network states can't exist in real life. Go.
I mean, you know, so that's the interesting thing, right? Define your threat model, right? Is kind of the maxim. Whether it's a private application or a network state, you're never going to have full sovereignty. This is my personal opinion, right? I don't think applications can ever be fully sovereign, in the sense of you can always have someone over your shoulder, looking at whatever you're doing. Same thing with any type of community, whether it's online or physical. But does it really matter? Slavoj Žižek had this interesting thing about surveillance. It's kind of an explicit answer to it, so I won't say the entire thing. But he effectively said, like, what if, you know, part of it is just not caring, right? Like not letting you know, the threat of that get into your OODA loop, your observe, orient, decide, and act loop, your decision-making calculus in your head. So it matters until it doesn't.
It came to my mind. Back to the other question, I'll come to this. Oh, yeah, so one of them was, yeah, focus also on the real connections, the things I was talking about, and especially on why you're doing things, right? So when we come to the question you had, again, am I doing it because I want to be better than you? Or I'm doing things and creating things and coding tools because those should be liberating tools and knowledge for the community. That's what I forgot before. Now to the question, I'm not that versed in network states. From as far as I went, there is kind of the critique of a nation and then almost like a, not praising, but maybe like support of the state, I mean, hence network states, which reading about like democratic confederalism and see how that works in some particular places in the world in practice, I think I find more appealing to actually see what nation as like a social glue with its culture, history, and heritage and values means, and how that can work without and outside of the state. But again, I'm not that far knowledgeable about network states versus, you know, like a nation state as a like bureaucratic overseeing structure, so I don't want to go too deep into that discussion.
The idea is pretty simple, right? It's simply that you have these online communities, and then eventually, like, we're all gonna want to not just hang out, but, you know, live in a community together. And then what does sovereignty look like, right? In that element, like our communities. So Balaji in the book uses this example of a community where everyone wants to eat keto, where sugar is banned, right? So that means you have to, like, you know, actually ban sugar. How do you do that? You need to have some type of political organization where, you know, at the border, sorry, sweet tooth, you know, you're done, right? So
you're saying like the idea of existing in a digital community completely, even if it's attached to a physical space, is a non-starter. There is no such thing as unco-optable digital communities.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because I mean, there's the hardware layer and there's the bio layer, right? The hardware layer is, you know, an open source. Look it up on the internet. You know, like hardware is not always secure, even at the chip layer, right? And then there's the human using the hardware that needs to eat, needs to do all their biological functions, right? Needs human contact. So yeah, for those two reasons, call me a metaverse skeptic, unfortunately, or fortunately.
I'm curious about that one. Like, I may fight back on both, but the first one is like, if hardware is ultimately compromisable, do you believe that there's no such thing as a software solution that could mitigate from compromised hardware? Can we never make cryptographic systems secure enough such that the hardware that operate them can not co-opt them?
Yeah, you can, but it's hard to do. So
yeah,
there are people working on that. Yeah, there's you know, trusted software that's running in like a virtual machine that allows you to have like a software enclave, so to speak. It's really hard to execute on.
Isn't that the goal for the networks we're trying to build? Like it's software designed to work in an adversarial setting, whether that be hardware conflicts or compromised hardware, or actual malicious behavior. Like I think the whole goal of the software we're building is to work on things that are compromised. And I'm interested to know if you think that we can ever get past the idea of like supply chain attacks on hardware and build systems that don't worry about them.
So I brought up two things. I brought up the hardware aspect and the the wetware aspect. So yeah, I mean, to your point, Corey, like, you know, people are working on secure software layers. Again, I don't know how good they are. governments and militaries use applications that allow you to have classified data like on your personal device, right? So these things exist, but it goes back to like the time versus privacy trade-off. It's like how long do you want that data to be secure for? So yeah, sure. I think that it's possible, but these systems haven't really been around for that long. So I think it's a wait and see approach. But then it goes back to the bio aspect, right? Like you're never gonna not have the Kevin Mitnick social engineering attack vector, right? It's always going to be there.
It's
There's also like a strange echo. So I like
it's a room that doesn't have any soft things in it. Why don't we take the moment to open it up to the audience if you have any questions, comments, concerns. Do we have an extra fourth mic? Yes, we do. How about that? I'm glad I guessed that.
Great talk. Like it. Thank you. Maybe first comment about this hardware problem. Like only thing how I can see it not compromised is using something like homomorphic encryption, where basically you never actually decode the information on the hardware. So I mean that's one thing. But my question to you is, when talking about the privacy in communities, or maybe more related to the crypto, now there is sort of becoming split in the crypto into like the good crypto or like compliant, let's say, crypto, and then maybe more gray area crypto because of all the regulations that are coming up. For example, in MiCA or I'm not sure in where, but they basically say that all the counterparties needs to be identified in order for the transaction to be like a valid from perspective of the state or the bureaucracy. So how do you see this when coming to privacy-oriented communities? Do you think we can actually live next to like the upcoming regulations that are coming, or are we doomed to be basically in gray area where if we want to keep privacy and maybe even some anonymity in the network, we must use peer-to-peer exchanges because, I don't know, for example, the centralized exchanges won't be able to serve us?
Yeah, I think this is a good topic. I think it's constantly becoming, as you said, but then there is also a level when it actually quite passed. It's here, right? Like it's existing, and there is getting this split, which we will call it like a split between the RegFi and the DarkFi, not as a project, but as generally. And again, dark markets and stuff. I wanna mention. I just talked here with my colleague Clemens about Lebanon. Same in Syria, same in many places. What darknet really is? It's a market, right? That's where you go buy vegetables and eggs and clothes. In Europe, it will be, that's a dark market. That's a dark market, but that's where people call it the market, like down the street. That's majority of the world of the people getting supplies in something which European regulators would call dark market. So before, like somebody's like, Serenco is trying to spread here a fear. The unfortunate situation is that now we call market this highly regulated thing, and even more unfortunate. And that's actually in our hands, because what the European Union or what have you, the Fed does, it's not in our hands. But what is in our hands is how crypto lives in that world. And then try to bend and go towards the direction, it's a losing battle. It's making ourselves completely fragile and obedient to the things which will never be in our hands. So you think, just this little step, and we're gonna be fine. Well, then the regulations will come harder. There is none of the interest of, and it's not about if it's good politicians or bad politicians. It's not emotional. It's to have rational analyzing on how these systems work and what economical incentives is there for and political incentive of control and centralized domination of the given structures, let the crypto just be out in there in like a open market, do its thing. Well, it is obviously a very threatening to, the non-working and completely corrupted TradFi which is existing right now. But then for crypto bending towards that, it's becoming corrupted as well. And crypto to a large degree has become corrupted. Let's put it like that. And unfortunately, centralized exchanges, many of them, it's the same story. And this is me not representing any organization. This is me speaking for myself, right? I had my talk before. This is just Serenko here. But I think it's not that users should be forced to use peer-to-peer exchanges. I think that should be a thing of choice, our first thing of choice. And it's sad to see that I would actually, again, flip it and say, what do we do wrong that users are forced to use central exchanges in the first place? Why do we even bother to talk about sovereign economy and have money in our hands and finally know your seats, know your money, know your keys, know your wallet and stuff. But all of a sudden we again do the same thing when you basically send your money to somebody because another 1,000 people did so, there must be a good person, and hope 9 billion is gone. How did that happen? It was a good guy. How many times we've seen that only in last year, right? So it's not about it's bad or good people behind central exchanges, it's just the fundamentals of crypto. Now what do we do wrong? What did we miss? Why did we let it corrupt in a way that it's so normalized to go first of all to central exchange and not to use peer-to-peer, OTC or what have you? And I think that should be the essence of that question, and see how we building structures and architecture which are anti-fragile. What I mean by that is that if you get a blow, if you get a hit, a fragile thing, snip, it breaks. So more you attack on it, more damage you create. What anti-fragile thing does, or a structure, it gets stronger. So again, there'll be a lot of things which are outside of our hands, not whether we are good or bad people or carrying in these categories, but because how we imagine our freedom and put it in practice in economic level will trigger the domination existing out there. Hence, we can expect that something like that will happen, but how we make our structures anti-fragile when such attacks happen, we become stronger, rather than have these mini central authorities which then take so many users down with them. Because we can never win in that way.
I'm going to follow up with that, and that regulation in general is in the context of a given jurisdiction, and we as humans are very different. Those jurisdictions on a global stage play out by nation states and those who live inside of them. I don't think it's fair that jurisdictions of one nation and the bias of that nation get to impinge on the freedoms of someone that don't give a shit about that nation. And so if we're thinking about building infrastructure where we can pass value on a global stage, that it should ever be subject to the bias of a portion of those who get to use it. So I think it's, even if it may not be forever possible to ever 100% remove that bias, maybe through coercion in nation states, through hardware level exploits or whatever it may be,
or the marketing department that wants to scale as widely as possible, right?
Yeah, the pursuit is worthwhile. And eventually we get better and better and maybe actually make something that does allow for an equal playing field, so you have a actual unbiased marketplace of ideas that people can move from one place to the other in. So I hope we're trying, but it remains to be seen, because as we've kind of covered in this panel, doing real privacy for a lot of people, generally speaking, is very hard. But once again, the pursuit is very much worthwhile.
I just wanted to follow on from what you guys are saying. It seems like a lot of this comes down to like culture. It's like, you know, the default thing, like whatever isn't whatever you don't have to check, people vote for, you know. And I think it really comes down to this cultural standpoint to make things anti-fragile. Because, you know, going to why are we on exchanges? Well, in the U.S., like, you can go to jail for a very long time if you trade more than $10,000 worth of cash for crypto. And I don't hardly do it for even a small amount, because I don't want to have any of that risk of having any particular legal repercussions. But like, why is that even possible? It's a cultural thing of that. Why didn't we push back and say this is tyranny? You know, this is not liberty that we should have as Americans, that we can trade with whoever in the privacy of how we want to do this. And I think it just kind of comes down to this cultural bit, and I think that's really the technology needs to exist, but the adoption of that and the use of it, you know, it does come down to like, well, what's the barrier of entry? Like, yeah, you know, grandma didn't get email until she had an iPad. Same thing with privacy. Like, you tried doing Tails, all that stuff. Oh, here's Signal. You know, you have to lower that barrier of entry, but you also have to get people to care enough about that, and then also support it in that, you know, it shouldn't be of like an outsized risk to have your own liberties. And I think comes down to a core culturally. And I don't know if you guys have any ideas on, you know, where do we even start to fix that? Because you know, the weakest part in any cybersecurity thing is always the individual. They're the easiest thing to break.
Like, why a spicy take is like, don't make it a cultural choice, make it a product feature.
My, yeah, you can opt in, but like, generally speaking, when I think about anti-fragile technology, like in the words we typically use in this ecosystem is decentralized and, you know, and crypto, blockchain, whatever. It's usually like talking about generally one thing, and then like my favorite, I think, quote that I stand by is like, we're building asshole-resistant technology. And like there assholes exist, right? Because we have differences in culture and thoughts on how we're supposed to live our lives, and so everyone has a subjective opinion on who an asshole is. And as a community gets bigger, there's more and more likely a situation where an asshole exists inside of that community. And more often than not, they're loud and they don't care about others. That's kind of the classification of an asshole. The goal of asshole-resistant technology is to remove their ability to influence the majority based on a minority's opinion, right? We're trying to even the playing field of how much a group of assholes can influence the rest of them in the community. That's generally speaking what we're trying to do. And the better we can do that, like, the better it is for the rest of the community, because assholes exist. And so, like, and once again, that's a subjective thing. You're trying to make it such that, generally speaking, small groups of people can influence large groups of people who don't want that influence. And that's, in my opinion, the whole goal of this like endeavor, is to do that as best we can. And if we can't do it completely, 100%, it's making it transparent so that when that influence happens, it can be acknowledged and dealt with on the human level, because ultimately speaking, it's all a human thing.
And another point too that Corey and I were talking about beforehand is, like, in terms of the cultural piece, it's good for governments to have privacy technology. They use it. So there was this huge debate in the 90s with public-private key encryption. Right, but now governments use that, and it's good. I mean, they benefit from that, right? So I think being able to just, talk to people in a calm manner that, like, this technology benefits everyone. Like SSL is great, right? We don't want our bank transactions being, when we have to use fiat, right? But it would, if SSL didn't exist, it would destroy the entire internet, right? So I think, like, there's a open amount of reframing that we can do on this topic.
All right, well, I think we're out of time. Thank you, Srinko. Thank you, Spencer. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.